This is Comcast Local Edition. I'm Jack Hansen. We're aboard the USS Hornet. This is the fantastic week celebrating the 35th anniversary of the 1969 Apollo missions. And with me right now is Alan Bean, the fourth man to ever walk on the moon. And I think that probably for the rest of your life is going to be the way you're going to be defined, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and you're proud of it, and why not?
Oh, definitely. Proud to be part of Apollo, proud to work with all the people, Navy people, NASA people that made an impossible dream come true.
Yeah, there were so many people involved in that program.
Several 100,000, really.
100,000 people, right?
Several 100,000.
You were picked to be an astronaut in 1963, is that right?
That's true. 14 of us were, and we were designated the Apollo astronauts, but really we knew that our leadership would probably come from the astronauts that came earlier, like Neil Armstrong, Pete Conrad, and others.
Right.
But then we made up some of the rest of the crew, like Dick Gordon and I came then in 1963. So Pete was the commander, Dick was the command module pilot, and this was all on Apollo 12. Now Apollo 11, Neil came, and then Mike and Buzz came with me.
Yeah.
So it worked out just kind of like we thought.
I met Dick the other night, a great guy, and told some wonderful stories about flying and about the whole space program. When you were picked for that, was this, they just reached out and say, you're a very qualified pilot, you've got all the qualifications. Did you volunteer for that program?
You volunteer, but what they do, NASA sets down and thinks of what qualities they want. For example, as I remember, we had to have 1,500 hours of jet time. We had to have at least a bachelor science degree. We had to be a certain age, a certain, not over 6 feet or whatever it was, like that. And then they go to the services, and the services then, because the Navy own me, they go and spread word around the Navy saying, if anybody's interested in becoming an astronaut, here are the qualifications, submit this, we'll take all the people in the Navy that are interested in it, we'll run a selection board, and then we'll submit 6 or 7 of what we think are the best candidates to NASA. And of course the Air Force did the same thing, and the Marines and civilians, they could just apply directly.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, then when NASA got this group, then they looked it over and they said, knowing space flight, the Navy just knew Navy stuff, Air Force things. They said, well, we think these are probably the ones that are most likely to be good astronauts. I mean,
qualify physically and mentally, I suppose.
Mentally is a big part, and a lot of it, you don't have to be the smartest guy around. I certainly wasn't. You don't have to be the best athletes. You don't have to be the healthiest. You've got to have all those things and be good at that, but I think a lot of it is just, how do you get along with other people? Can you get on a crew with anybody? Deke Slayton, who was our boss, used to say, I don't have to worry about crews because I selected people that were going to work together no matter what their personality quirks were, because we all got those too. And that turned out to be true.
I don't think there's any other adventure that mankind has undertaken, where 3 people were in the more dangerous, more adventuresome adventure than you were in. I mean, to get along is an understatement. Realizing, guys, we're going to the moon. You know, that's a pretty thrilling thing in itself.
It is, and in those days it seemed funny to me now, but we knew we were going to the moon. It was like we had the schedule, we could see the spacecraft building, we'd see the rocket on the pad, and we'd be saying, Neil and Buzz and Mike are going to the moon in July. We don't know if maybe July the 10th, maybe it's the 20th, we don't know. But we'll be going several months later. There's our spacecraft. It's nearly not as complete as theirs. So, and the moon, as I looked at it, looked close. Now the moon looks pretty far away because we don't have any of these spaceships that can go to the moon. We've got a wonderful shuttle that can go to the space station, but we're not going to the moon anytime soon. The president will tell us.
Yeah, we're going to hold that right there. We're going to have you come back as a guest again. Thanks very much for being here, Alan. As Comcast Local Edition, I'm Jack Hansen. We're on the USS Hornet. Thanks so much for watching. This is Comcast Local Edition. We are on the USS Hornet. We're in Alameda. The aircraft carrier is a floating museum. It's open practically all year round. You can come and visit and get to look back in the history, American history involved with the Apollo space program. With me right now is Alan Bean. He is the fourth man in humanity, in the world, in civilization, mankind, to walk on the moon. Alan, it's a great pleasure to meet you.
Glad to be here today.
We talked a little bit about getting ready to go to the moon and so forth. When you got into the Apollo, and got in there, strapped in, I've always wondered about this, about astronauts. And you're sitting there and you're strapped in. Is it all business at that point? Does anything flash before your eyes? Is there fear involved, apprehension? What goes on?
Well, I think a lot of it is business because you have things to do, switches to throw, checks to make, things like that, working with the ground and mission control. But it's been my experience talking to other astronauts and my own that you're a lot more concerned about being able to do the job you've been trained to do. You're not worried about your life. You're worried about, boy, if something goes wrong, I hope I know what to do. I've been trained here. I hope I can keep my cool and throw the right switch, make the right report. So that kind of what's going through your mind. You know that there's a lot on the line. Certainly as you go out to the moon, 240,000 miles away, a lot's on the line.
Yeah.
We had a lot of confidence in our training and ourselves. We always felt like if our hardware will work, hardware eventually breaks. Whether it's your car, your light bulb, your stove, they eventually break. You don't know when. And that's a feeling that you've got flying airplanes or spaceships. And so we felt like if our hardware will just work, we'll do this mission. And of course it worked for us, but Apollo 13 came after us. Their hardware didn't work, see?
Right.
But they could have done the job.
Yeah, okay. You're sitting atop, is it 32 stories high?
Something like that, 360 feet or something like that.
Whatever
it's way up there.
And when that power goes, it's the rocket. It's the power of that when we see it on television taking off. It's hard for us normal human beings, and I don't consider astronauts normal human beings. I think you're above normal. You're beyond, and mentally, at least mentally and maybe physically also, most human beings to go through that.
We're normally, but we've had a lot of training to do stuff. It is. If those of your viewers that have seen Apollo 13 may remember that Tom Hanks, when he got strapped in, the ground crewman put his foot on his shoulder and tightened his,
strapped him in.
That's what they do, because if we weren't strapped in that tight, that vehicle shakes so much you wouldn't be able to hold on, and you'd bounce around there, break your visor, because the instrument panel's about right here. You'd bounce around, break it, knock
this thing is going like this, and I guess.
It's going. The thought I had when we lifted off was, can metal stand this kind of force? I'd never been in any vehicle, all that I'd flown, driven in, or gone over bumps in, or tractors, or anything else that was shaking and moving like that. I thought it might be possible that steel wouldn't hold together and it would come apart. But engineers knew that it wouldn't. But it was an eye-opening experience.
So that thought did go through your
definitely.
mind.
The exact way I said. Okay. Will it hold together?
Yeah. When you got to the moon, I can't say this to too many people, so pardon me for smiling. When you got to the moon, it was decided that beforehand that you would walk on the moon?
Oh yeah, we knew at the beginning of training that when the way it was done at that time was the most experienced person, Pete Conrad, would be the commander.
Right, he'd been there.
The next most experienced person on our crew would have to be Dick Gordon, because he had flown a Gemini flight. He needed to stay with the command module because it was our only way home. I was the least experienced guy. I hadn't flown yet, and I guess they said, well, we'll put him with Pete. Pete will keep him out of trouble. He gets lucky and gets to go to the moon, but we need the two most capable people watching the two pieces of hardware. And later on, they didn't have that requirement, but at the beginning, they did. Okay. And so I got lucky, got to go down and walk around on the moon, even though Dick Gordon was more qualified than I was.
Thanks for being our guest, Alan.
Yeah.
Come back again. It's Comcast Local Edition. I'm Jack Hansen on USS Hornet. Thank you for watching. This is Comcast Local Edition. I'm Jack Hansen. We're on the USS Hornet in Alameda. It's a floating museum. You should visit it. It's open to the public. And Alan Bean is with me right now. He is the fourth person in the world in the history of man to walk on the moon. I have to say that every time because it's an amazing thing, and he's a great guy besides. Nice to have you here.
I'm glad to be
Okay,
here.
we were talking before about some of your adventures going up to the fact that you got to the moon. You got there, they said, all right, you're going to be walking on the moon. Tell me about that first step, getting out of the craft and stepping down on the moon.
Well, Pete Conrad was the commander. He got out first, and he had been down for about 20 minutes taking an emergency sample in case we had to leave. We'd still have some dirt from the ocean of storms, doing some other work. And then it came my time to go down, and I can remember backing out of the door, kind of crawling backwards down the ladder, closing the door, not locking it, as they say, going down the ladder, jumping onto the pad, not the moon, but the pad. And then it's not possible for a human who's used to this 1G to just step off and walk around. Neil didn't do that, Neil Armstrong. You have to hold on and then get your balance and then let go. And you'll find that you stand there a while and suddenly you notice the sensors in your legs are not used to 1.6G, they're used to 1.
Right.
And so pretty soon you have to grab them. It reminded me of when you take a child and they're trying to learn to stand up and they're standing near your couch. They hold on, they let go, then they start to wobble, maybe they sit down on their diaper.
Right.
But pretty soon they learn to stand up. It only took us about a minute or 2 minutes to learn to stand up, but we had to keep our eyes open. And if you remember back to Apollo 11 when they were on the moon dancing around.
Right, they were sort of bouncing around.
That's right. They're bouncing around like a boxer in a ring, and if you'll jump around, you'll move under your center of gravity. If they'd stopped still, they would have had a little more time balancing themselves. Yeah.
So when you got onto the moon itself, and your mission was to collect moon rocks or dust and dirt, and you start scooping it up and things like that, and do the experiments. Take pictures. How long were you actually on the moon itself?
We were out there, Pete and I were out there about 3.5 hours the first time. Then we went back in, went to bed, got up the next day, went out.
Pardon me for laughing.
Hammocks.
Went to bed.
Hammocks.
Went to bed on the moon.
Didn't sleep too well either, I might add.
Didn't count sheep up there. That's something.
No, I don't know what you have to count rocks. That's all that's there. Or craters.
Right.
And that's one of the nice things about being on Earth. Up there, I was only gone 10 days.
Yeah.
The only thing that moved were Pete and I and Dick and our 2 spacecraft. When I got back to Earth ever since, I'm always looking around thinking, gee, there's a squirrel moving, or there's a tree waving, or something. Nothing ever moved on
no
our
wind
trip.
Besides.
There's no wind.
No wind,
There's
anything.
Never been any wind. We live in paradise here. We live. I look around every day and think, we're in paradise. We're on the Garden of Eden, and we get to live our whole life here.
And you, as an accomplished artist, must have captured some of those memories, and you've done beautiful paintings and artwork of space exploration and stuff, which are for sale here on the ship, actually. And that perception of the moon might be a little different, and the perception of the Earth. Tell me, did you have a chance when you were doing that? Could you look back and see the Earth in that position?
Yes. I saw it, and it was so beautiful, blue and white. Everything else in the heavens looked about the same, except the sun was brighter because no atmosphere. But everything else looked about the same, and we know from looking at our telescopes and the probes we've sent out into the universe that there isn't a place that we know of yet. They're probably out around some star somewhere that look as beautiful as the Earth. The Earth is a place to be. I'm so glad I'm an Earth person. I'm so glad there are a lot of people here on this aircraft carrier. It made me like being here. I never complain about the weather. There's no weather on the moon. I've not complained about the weather. If it snowed today, I'd like it. If it rains, I'm going to like it. If it's fog till midnight, I like it. Same way with crowds. If I'm standing in line somewhere at the ball game, went to Super Bowl this year, I'm glad to be there. I don't care if they have 200,000 people there.
Great to have you here, Alan. That's terrific. Great to meet you. That's Comcast Local Edition. I'm on the USS Hornet in Alameda. Jack Hansen, thanks for watching.